Hi, and welcome to the Church Brain Podcast, where we help pastors and church leaders understand how churches think, respond, and recover during seasons of stress, uncertainty, and transition. Can I ask you a question? Is anyone else tired of icebreakers at the beginning of meetings? Boy, I know I am. Really, seriously, not because I don't want to know people, not because, well, maybe, but not because I don't want to know people, but because relationships matter. But sometimes I wonder if we're spending our energy solving the wrong problem. Look, we've all been there, right? Tell us your favorite vacation. Tell us something interesting about yourself. Tell your most embarrassing moment. Tell us what your superpower is. If you were a tree, what would you be? Everyone participates, everybody talks, everybody might even laugh. But then 15 minutes later, somebody says, does anyone have concerns about this decision? And suddenly the room goes silent. Nobody talks. Nobody asks questions. Nobody pushes back. Nobody's laughing for sure. And everybody just kind of nods. At least that's what it looks like. Well, then 3 weeks later, you discover half the room had concerns, but weren't going to tell anybody. What happened? That's what we're going to talk about today. In this week's leadership briefing, we discussed how silence doesn't always mean agreement. Sometimes silence means uncertainty. Sometimes it means caution. Sometimes it might even mean fear. The challenge for leaders is that silence is usually a symptom, but it's not the problem. Here's the real question. How do we create a culture where people can speak honestly, not rudely, not endlessly, not contentiously, but honestly? How do we create committee meetings where concerns can be voiced? How can we create staff meetings where questions can be asked? How do we create churches where disagreement is not immediately interpreted as disunity? I want to give you 6 practical ways leaders can build that kind of culture. They're not foolproof. It's not 6 and done, and now, poof, we have a brand new culture. It takes work. It takes effort. But I am convinced if we do these things, we are well on our way to building a better culture, a stronger culture, and I think a more Christ-like culture. Number 1, leader, go first. It's really simple. Lead. Go first. Lead the line. Be the line leader. Follow the leader, but you go first. You see, people rarely become more vulnerable than their leader. Have you ever told about a time that you admitted that you did something wrong? Did you ever admit a mistake in front of a committee or a church? Have you ever changed your mind because somebody else had a better idea and you credited it to them? Let's talk about the difference between confidence and pretending to have all the answers, because there's a difference, right? Yeah, right? Of course there is. Well, what happens when a leader has the last word every time? Why not give that up to somebody else? But what would happen if a leader would say this? Hey, I may be missing something here. Can you help me understand this more? If leaders go first, then the next question becomes whether the room knows it's safe to follow. Because if you don't show them how it's safe, if you don't show some vulnerability first, they're never going to show vulnerability. And it's not going to create safety in the room. But safety doesn't come automatically. So you've got to set some ground rules. That's number 2. You've got to set some ground rules. See, healthy cultures don't happen automatically. What ground rules should we actually use? Maybe we even write them down, kind of like, moms and dads would write some house rules down, and here's the rule, here's the consequence, but here's the rule, here's the reward. Obedience is what we want, and these are the rules of the house. Maybe we need to be setting up some church house rules, some committee ground rules. When I go and train search committees, I talk about this. I talk about, okay, guys, as a committee, you need to set some ground rules on confidentiality. You need to set ground rules on how do we make decisions, what happens when we disagree about a decision. Set those ground rules up front. We need to be saying and telling people, look, questions are welcome. Ask your questions. Disagree with me. It doesn't mean that you aren't loyal to me. It means that you have a difference of opinion. But leader, you've got to be willing to hear the disagreement. You've got to be willing to maybe even say, you know what, I'm wrong on this. I think you're right. Look how far that could go. You go first, but then let's set some ground rules. Look, we're going to attack problems, but we're not going to attack people. We're not going to attack each other. I was recently talking to a couple of committee members about a delicate situation. And that's basically what I was telling them. Look, you need to allow the freedom of expression within your committee. If somebody doesn't like something, you need to let them be able to share it. And then I told the person that I knew would have the problem, I said, look, you can't make it personal. You keep it professional. Share the disagreement, but don't cross the line into personal attacks and personal affronts. Attack the problem, but don't attack the people. Maybe we need to talk about how the goal here is to understand, not win the argument. Hey, leader, that's for you too. Look, it's me as much as it is you. But we've got to stop trying to win every argument. And hey, look, I'm first offender here. If I get my competitive nature kicks in when I get, and I've got to really work on that and manage that. But the goal is to understand, not just win the argument. You already know what that looks like when we don't have the ground rules said. So what happens if we do? And we need to be able to have these conversations. And we need to be able to talk about this stuff. Maybe start a committee meeting by reviewing the expectations for how conversations happen in this meeting, especially if you've had a difficult committee. Set the ground rules, and at the top of the agenda, here's the ground rules. The chairman needs to go over the ground rules. The chairman needs to hold everybody accountable to the ground rules. Of course, rules don't create the trust, but the consistency to hold the rules does help create the trust. Number 3, honor the rules, but respond without defending. See here, that's an important thing. Learn how to respond to somebody without defending. So you've made a statement. You have said, whatever, and you've made your claim, and somebody is responding to that, and they are in disagreement. You know what our natural reaction is? To defend our position. We just dig our heels in and we defend our position. But if we want safe spaces in our committees and we want to have a place where people can talk and silence doesn't run the meeting, then we have to stop defending our positions as this natural rebuttal. If somebody disagrees and shares that, ask them questions about it. Hey, help me understand your position. Where did you come to that conclusion? How did you come to that conclusion? And instead of just defending the position, start collaborating, start talking to one another. Everybody watches what happens to the first dissenter. When somebody disagrees with you, Pastor, the first one that disagrees with you, how you react, everybody else is watching to see how you react. Because if you obliterate them, or you just dismiss them, or you disrespect them, you know what's going to happen? Nobody's going to talk anymore. That's what's going to happen. Nobody's going to talk anymore. So we have to talk through these things, and we have to learn and practice not retaliating in our responses. Well, I don't think this is a good idea. What are you going to say to that? The defensive leader says, well, let me tell you 4 ways why it is a good idea, and you're stupid. I mean, you say, well, I would never do that. Well, let me tell you, I have seen a lot of stuff, right? When the gloves come off, it gets bad, and we want them to talk, but we don't want them to fight. So we have to manage our responses. This goes back to emotional intelligence, which I'll probably talk about in another podcast sometime. But you got to understand what's triggering you, and then you got to regulate that, man. You've got to hold the line in your own spirit. You need to have the curious leader response. Well, you know what? That's curious. Ted Lasso is famous for this quote, right? Be curious, not judgmental. It's so true. I don't care if you like Ted Lasso or not. The point is, it's true. Be curious, not judgmental. And when we respond with judgment, well, where'd you come up with that idea? Okay, that's a judgmental way to say that. Or we could say, hey, can you tell me more? I'm interested in knowing your position on that. Now, see, that embraces them to talk. And it tells everybody else in the room it's okay to talk, and it's okay to even disagree with you. Search committee concerns, budget discussions, staffing discussions, search committees, like I said, program changes. Once people believe that they won't be punished for speaking up, we can begin hearing from voices that we might otherwise miss. Right? Number 4, draw out the quiet voices. The loudest voice is not always the most representative voice. I served a church, no joke. I served a church where at every business meeting, we'd have some decision that needed to be made. And I kid you not, whoever spoke last before the vote, that's how the vote went. The loudest one would win, largely because we didn't let dissenting voices talk. We didn't let the quiet ones speak up. We didn't give them respect and the room to be able to have a conversation. So we need to understand silence does not mean agreement. That's what the briefing talked about. And just because somebody speaks up in favor or against it doesn't mean that's how everybody really feels. I mean, how many times have you gone into the parking lot after the business meeting and you could count, you're already adding it up. Nobody wanted to do what we all just voted for. Well, why did they vote? Because that's the human group dynamic. It's just that group mentality and mob mentality. And we just go along to get along because we aren't giving space, because we're afraid of confrontation. We're afraid of conflict. But if you set the ground rules and you've modeled what needs to happen and you are drawing out the voices, you're going to hear and have a better understanding of what's actually going on. Like, hey, John, what are you thinking? If you've got a committee of 5 and 2 people are driving the entire conversation and John hadn't said a word, I'd ask, hey, John, what are you thinking? Largely because if I just say, what's everybody think, those 2 are going to jabber all night long. And so I have to come in and say, hey, John, what do you think? Hey, Susan, what do you think? Mary, you've been quiet tonight. Tell me what's on your mind about this. Before we move on, let's hear from a different perspective. Robert's Rules of Order even require somebody who speaks for it and then somebody who speaks against it, somebody who speaks for, but we have to bring that into play into our committees. Some people need an invitation more than an opportunity, because all of you are saying the same thing that I would say. Well, if they want to speak up, let them speak up. Come on, leader, lead. Let them know. Hey, look, tell us what you think. Once people begin participating, the quality of the questions determines the quality of the discussion. When you ask better questions and you ask appropriate, pointed questions, you're going to get more people involved, and that's going to have a more robust and rich discussion where you can maybe actually make a good decision for a change, right? Number 5, ask better questions, right? How many times do we ask questions that kill discussion? Because we do this. Any questions? Now, we want to think by asking that we're literally giving people the space to ask questions. That's not what people hear. What people hear is he doesn't want us to talk anymore, and so he's saying that because that's the polite thing to say, but I'm not going to say anything because I know he really doesn't want to. And you're sitting there going, but I wanted them to. Then ask a better question. Is everybody okay with this? That says they better not speak up against you. Hey, can we move on? That says we're cutting off discussion and nobody gets to talk. But what if we ask this? Hey, everybody, what concerns have we not discussed tonight? Now, that's a different question. What unintended consequences might we face if we go forward with this decision? What consequences might we face if we don't move forward with this decision? Now, see, that's discussion questions. That's not shut it down questions. That's discussion questions. What would somebody say who disagrees with this? So even the people that are proponents for whatever it is, you're forcing them to think what the other side might say, which might allow somebody who is on the other side to speak up. Hey, what are we missing here? If this fails, why would it fail? These are better questions. You know what? We might even need to write down some questions as we walk into it. You know what's going to come. You know what's on the agenda. Develop some questions and take them with you on a little note card or put it in your notes app or whatever. Eventually healthy conversations begin producing healthy cultures. And then you have to, number 6, reward the culture that you want. Culture is reinforced. It's not just announced. Okay, hey, everybody, today starts the healthy culture. You can't just announce that, but you reward the culture that you want. So you reinforce it in this way. Thank people publicly that ask the hard question. You know what, John? Thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate that. I didn't see it that way. Celebrate thoughtful disagreement. Let people raise the concerns and show how that could improve the decision. Explain that appreciation is, talk about that with people. Explain that to them. We need this to be repeated. Those places where honesty is rewarded versus where honesty is punished, those are the healthy cultures that we want. A famous illustration, and I love this one, and it's, do you understand the difference between a thermostat and a thermometer? One reports the temperature, and the other one changes it. Which one are you going to be, and which one do you want your people to be? People who speak honestly often help change the temperature of the room. If your church is unusually quiet, don't start by asking people, why aren't you speaking up? Ask what experiences to yourself. Think about what experiences may have taught them it wasn't safe to speak. And is that on you? How long have you been there? Then begin building a culture where honesty is welcomed, respected, and rewarded. And that is going to be a wonderful thing for your church. Well, thank you for spending a few minutes with me. If this has been helpful, just subscribe to the Church Brain and you can get the leadership briefings and the podcast every week. And if you know somebody going through a difficult time, why don't you share this with them? Maybe they have a silent church or they're having a difficult time. Share this with them. You guys have a great day and may God bless us all.